So, hello and welcome to the Morale Project podcast. I'm your host, Senior Master Sergeant Cynthia Limoges, and today's topic is why EQ? Why emotional intelligence? I am so excited to have our special guest here with me, Captain Moises Bourdeau. Captain, I know I just butchered your name.
Ma'am,
So.
there's no way you could butcher my name. Any way you say it is totally correct. And it's a pleasure being here to discuss emotional intelligence.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about you.
From a personal standpoint, I used to be a psych nurse. I was a psych nurse for the last 10 years. Made a transition to med surg, and now I'm working in an intensive care unit. And I've been with the Ordana National Guard for the last 5 to 6 years, operating as a immunization officer. And today, I am not here to give you shots, and we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence.
All
yes,
right.
ma'am.
And what better career field to have emotional intelligence, right? With all that experience.
You could use emotional intelligence everywhere, in every field. Whether we are leaders or whether we're talking to airmen, emotional intelligence is everyone and everywhere.
Right. Agreed. So give us your spiel. What do you think? Why is it so important to us?
When we talk about emotional intelligence, we're talking about the ability to manage your own emotions as well as those of others. Mm-hmm. By managing, I mean it's the ability to express and control those emotions. Also to understand, to interpret and respond to the emotions of yourself and as well as others. And because what we don't want to be controlled by our own emotions. Because, every single day, every actions that we take is controlled by our thoughts and it's controlled by our emotions. And what we want to do is to have that emotional intelligence so we could take the appropriate actions at the appropriate time.
So, Captain, can you just tell us the difference between EQ, emotional intelligence, when we throw these different terms around?
So when you talk about EQ is one thing, is emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. When you talk about IQ, which is the term that people often use, it's intelligence quotient. So when you talk about IQ, it's literally the ability to solve problems, to use logic or grasp, or how we grasp and communicate complex ideas. It's just more like binary. It's all about ideas, all about how we solve problems, which is what is very common. Emotional intelligence, EQ on the other hand, is the ability to recognize the emotions, those emotions that we feel, those emotions that other people are feeling, have that sense of self-awareness that we're going to talk a little bit later on, and how we can use that self-awareness to guide our decisions.
So why do you think emotional intelligence is so important to us?
Emotional intelligence is important because that's the ability to manage our own emotions and those around us. By managing, I mean it's the ability to express and control those emotions, also to understand, to interpret, and to respond to those emotions accordingly. As a result, remember, we are human beings. We're all driven by our emotions and all react based on those emotions. And we do not want to be prisoners, and we do not want to be controlled by those emotions. And that's why EQ is relevant and important.
Yeah. And I feel like this is in our everyday lives, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I think earlier when we were talking, you were saying it starts with self-awareness, correct?
Correct. All right. And we talk about self-awareness and how important EQ plays a role in being self-aware.
Ma'am, that's the key. Because when talking about emotional intelligence, it starts with self-awareness indeed. Because we need to have a clear picture of our own strengths and weaknesses. And as leaders, we need to know our own capabilities, and so we could leverage our own strength and be able to communicate, to relate to other people better. And also, when talking about self-awareness, there's also empathy. You have certain social skills, and it's in our daily lives because we deal with people.
Right, yeah. You use the word empathy. It's quite interesting. So can you explain empathy a little bit, or?
When we're talking about empathy, it's one of the things that people talk a lot about, but they don't elaborate more. It's not just the ability to understand what people are going through, because when someone's going through a tough time, you could sit back and say, "Oh, I understand what you're saying. Oh, yeah, I feel bad for you," but it's not necessarily the case. Right. You need to be in their shoes. You need to walk a mile in their shoes. You need to be able to get to their level, feel their pain, feel their sorrow, for you to be able to communicate. Because remember, communications is not just what is said; it's what it is perceived on both ends of the spectrum. And when someone feel that you can connect with them, when someone feel that you truly grasp their pain or what they are going through, you're definitely more able to communicate with them or to get a better outcome.
Wow, that is really, really powerful. I agree with you, absolutely. And so I think about our military structure, and we talk about all this emotions, and it's not always well received, right?
It is not well received. The reason why is because in the military, while it's a new thing that we're trying to do now, there's also this misconception that we're not supposed to have any emotions in the military. Like it's taboo. Like we're all supposed to be robots and soldiers have no feelings. But that is not necessarily the case. Because, we all have good days and we all have bad days. And when, as a leader, when you look at someone, you say, how are you feeling today? The key is you're going to have a variety of answers. You could have the regular soldier's answers, everything's doing well, ma'am. But you need to be able to read between the line. Yeah. You need to be able to see some of those cues, whether they are verbal or non-verbal cues. And sometimes someone may be having a bad day. You ask someone, how are you feeling today? And they're like, I'm fine. Or they may snap at you. And when we go back to self-awareness, it's not to take their answers personally. It's to be able to take a step back, say, it's not a reflection of me. It's a reflection of what they're going through. Let me try to dig a little bit deeper to see how I can help that person. And I remember when we talked about this, there's a friend of mine, he was always nice to me. And there's one day, he said, hey, how you doing? I wanted to give him a big hug. And it just kind of brushed me off. And at first I was a little bit mad. I'm like, that's my friend. We always have a good time. Come to find out later on, he was going through a divorce. Things were not good for him at home. Lost his kid. There was so much going through it. Instead of me, let's say at that time, when we were talking about emotional intelligence, instead of me saying that, man, you're just a horrible person, you're having a bad day, you're just mean to me, but being able to reach back to that person says, I know if we may not be going through a rough time. I do not know what's going on, but know that I'm here to help you. And just the fact that I went through this extra mile to kind of, extend a little vignette to him. And when he finally opened up, it made a big difference to him and to me as well. And at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to be able to touch people's lives. We want to be able to connect and communicate effectively.
That's such a great example of empathy, but also it's a great example of being self-aware and not taking things personally.
Yes, ma'am.
Because oftentimes I find like when we're leaders, sometimes we take things personally.
Yes, ma'am.
And it doesn't mean we have to have like all the answers right then and there. We can always say like, hey, I need to take a 5 and I can check it with him later or her later to see if there's something going on. Right? I mean, do you agree?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And that's when it gets a little bit complicated, when you put your personal feelings first and you do not assess your issues. Because sometimes, remember, while we're trying to manage other people's feelings as leaders, we're trying to manage other people's, not just managing their emotions, because it seems like it's a little bit difficult. We can only control ourselves. But most importantly, we can control how we react to certain circumstances. Yeah. And that's where self-awareness comes in, and that's where it's key. So we may have we all have our own biases when dealing with certain circumstances. And it's to know that, well, let me not take certain things personal. Let's say Airman Snuffle is not mad at me. It's not because I'm a bad leader. Therefore, they need to respect authority. We just need to know that, hey, sometimes people are just having a bad day. Sometimes we are the ones that are having a bad day and not taking up on somebody else. Because if I come grumpy and I'm approaching you, let's say I'm being mean to you, ma'am, and every action's got the reactions back. And if you're mean to me, I should not be saying that, how dare you talk to me in certain ways. We need all self-awareness, empathy, everything. Remember, it always starts with us.
Right. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. So these are all great reasons as to why EQ is so worth it in our daily lives. And I always push, although our goal is military, I try to relate to everyone on a human level.
Correct.
Right? Because we're all human.
Yes, we are.
And is it fair to say, in my mind, EQ is not a destination at all. I say this all the time. It's a journey.
Yes,
right?
Indeed.
It's a journey.
And EQ even more important than IQ.
Right.
Because sometimes you could be smart. Some people can process things left and right. I have seen some phenomenal airmen who can get the job done like no others, but they lack this EQ. They lack this emotional quotient because when you can't connect with the people don't. And I remember this saying, if I remember it correctly, people don't remember what you did for them, but they remember how you made them feel.
That is so true.
They remember how you made them feel. They remember a hug. They remember a high five. They remember how you helped them transition from one bad situation to another one's. Emotions carry weight. Emotions last. And that's why it's very important. And that's why we're talking about emotional intelligence today.
So can you talk a little bit about the difference between sympathy and empathy when we talk about that?
Sympathy is literally telling someone that I feel bad for you. If we see someone going through a hard time, it's easy to tell them, yeah, I feel bad. It's all right. But if you really want to connect, it's through empathy. When you tell the person, I am here with you, that carries much more weight, because we are letting the person know that we may not have all the answers, but we're trying to fill the void with our presence, whether it's a hug, whether it's a quick text, or whether just sitting there next to the person. And sometimes your presence carries so much weight. Yeah. And that's what is usually the main difference between empathy and sympathy, because one, you're staying from afar, you let the person know that you're there. And the other one, which is empathy, you are currently sitting right next to the person, letting them feel like we are connecting. I may not know your pain, I may not feel it to the extent that you do, but know that I'm there for you. And sometimes that's all people need.
Yeah, and I'm here, and I don't have the answers, and I'm just going to be silent with you.
That is correct.
And feel what it is, if I can feel what you're feeling, right?
And that's true. And one of the things that this pandemic has done for us, it's when you talk about social distancing, it's the power of a hug.
Oh,
when someone's going
yeah.
through a hard time, and to be able to just give them a hug, a solid hug, and it's one thing that we miss a lot. Yeah. And that's why when people see each other nowadays, everybody's first thing that, hey, I'm a hugger too.
All about
I always get in trouble for
Yeah.
that. But a hug, a special touch, a silent touch, it always says much more.
Yeah, and I feel like people sense that too.
Oh, people can.
Sometimes your presence, even people sense that.
People do,
yeah.
and that's important. That is how we show. That's one of the key things about emotional intelligence. We're talking about this empathy. We're talking about EQ. It's the ability to connect, and if you can connect at that level, and especially when you connect with them when they are going through a hard time, and you can make people feel that you're there for them. Oh, they will be there for you as well.
Yeah.
Those airmen will always have your back because they will remember what you've done for them.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. 100%. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining me in my podcast. You will definitely be back in the
Ma'am,
project.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thrilled.
It's always a pleasure being here with you, chatting with you. I know all the topics that you have, some of the topics that you mentioned you're going to be talking later on down the road in those podcasts are phenomenal. I can't wait to join you again, and I hope that everybody will benefit from the podcast that we are having.
Absolutely. So tune in. I look forward to everyone tuning in. If you're thrilled about presenting a topic, please feel free to reach out. You can reach me via email, cynthia.limoges@us.af.mil. So you can find this episode and future episodes of the Morale Project on iTunes, Spotify, or on the 143rd Facebook page.
The Morale Project.